Reading through the Bible in 1 year, January 23rd, Genesis 24, Matthew 23, Nehemiah chapter 13, and Acts chapter 23. Now Abraham was old, advanced in age, as old people tend to be, and Yahweh had blessed Abraham in every way. And Abraham said to his servant, the eldest of his household, who ruled over all that he owned, please, place your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by Yahweh, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you shall not take a wife for my son of the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I live. But you shall go to my land and to my kin, and take a wife for my son Isaac. And the servant said to him, suppose the woman is not willing to follow me to this land. Should I indeed take your son back to the land from where you came? And Abraham said to him, beware, lest you take my son back there. Yahweh, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my kin, and who spoke to me and who swore to me, saying, to your seed I will give this land. He will send his angel before you, and you will take a wife for my son from there. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this oath of mine. Only do not take my son back there. So the servant placed his hand under the thigh of Abraham, his master, and swore to him concerning this matter. Then this servant took 10 camels, and from the camels of his... Then the servant took 10 camels from the camels of his master, and he went with all kinds of good things of his master's in his hand. So he arose and went to Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor. And he made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of water at evening time, the time when the young women go out to draw the water. And he said to Yahweh, the God of my... and he said, O Yahweh, the God of my master Abraham, please cause this to happen before me today, and show loving kindness to my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Now may it be that the young woman to whom I say, please let down your jar so that I may drink, and she says, drink, and I will give water to your camels to drink also. May she be the one to whom you have decided for your servant Isaac. That doesn't sound right. Let me start over. So again, drink, and I will give water to your camels to drink also. May she be the one whom you have decided for your servant Isaac. And by this I will know that you have shown loving kindness to my master. And before he had finished speaking, behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor, was coming out with her jar on her shoulder. Now the young woman was very beautiful in appearance, a virgin, and no man had known her. And she went, again, virgin not necessarily meaning that she hasn't had sex. It could also mean that she's just a young woman, right? And she went down to the spring and filled her jar and came up. Then the servant ran to meet her and said, please give me a little water to drink from your jar. And she said, drink, my lord. And she quickly lowered her jar to her hand and gave him a drink. Now when she had finished giving him a drink, she said, I will draw also for your camels until they have finished drinking. So she hurried and emptied her jar into the watering channel and ran again to the well to draw. And she drew for all his camels. Meanwhile, the man was gazing at her in silence to know whether Yahweh had made his journey successful or not. Now it happened that when the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold ring weighing half a shekel and 2 bracelets for her wrists weighing 10 shekels in gold, and said, whose daughter are you? Please tell me, is there a place for us to lodge in your father's house? And she said, I am the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. And she said to him, we have plenty of both straw and feed and a place to lodge in. And the man bowed low and worshipped Yahweh. And he said, blessed be Yahweh, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his loving kindness and his truth toward my master, As for me, Yahweh has guided me to the house, has guided me in the way to the house of my master's brothers." Then the young woman ran and told her mother's household about all these things. Now, Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban. This is important for later. And Laban ran outside to the man at the spring. Again, he's showing all these trappings of wealth. This is something Laban's paying attention to. Now, it happened when when he saw the ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrists, and when he heard the words of Rebekah, his sister, saying, "This is what the man has said to me." He came out to the man, and behold, he was standing by the camels at the spring. And he said, "Come in, blessed of Yahweh. Why do you stand outside, since I have prepared the house and a place for the camels?" So the man came into the house. Then Laban unloaded the camels, and he gave straw and feed to the camels, and water to wash his feet, and the feet of the young men who were with him. Then food was set before them to eat. But he said, "I will not eat until I have spoken my words." And he said, "Speak." So he said, "I am Abraham's servant, and Yahweh has greatly blessed my master, so he has become great, and has given him flocks and herds, and silver and gold, and male and female slaves, and camels and donkeys. Now, Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master in her old age, and he has given him all that he has. And my master made me swear, saying, 'You shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites in whose land I live, but you shall go to my father's house and to my family, and take a wife for my son.' Then I said to my master, 'Well, suppose the woman does not follow me?' And he said, 'Yahweh, before whom I have walked, will send his angel with you. It will make your journey successful, and you will take a wife for my son from my family and from my father's house. Then you will be free from my oath when you come to my relatives. Now, if they do not give her to you, you will be free from my oath.' So I came today to the spring, and I said, 'O Yahweh, God of my master Abraham, now if you will make my journey on which I go successful, behold, I am standing by the spring of water. And may it be that the maiden who comes out to draw, and to whom I say, "Please let me drink a little water from your jar," and she will say to me, "You drink, and I will draw also for your camels." She is the woman whom Yahweh has decided upon for my master's son." Before I had finished speaking in my heart, behold, Rebekah was coming out with her jar on her shoulder. And she went down to the spring and drew. And I said to her, "Please give me a drink." Then she hurried and lowered her jar from her shoulder and said, "Drink, and I will also give water to your camels to drink." So I drank, and she also gave water to the camels to drink. Then I asked her and said, "Whose daughter are you?" And she said, "The daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him." And I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrists. And I bowed low and worshipped Yahweh. And I blessed Yahweh, the God of my master Abraham, who had guided me in the true way to take the daughter of my master's relative for his son. Now, if you are going to show loving kindness and truth with my master, tell me, and if not, tell me, that I may return to the right or to the left." Then Laban and Bethuel answered and said, "Well, the matter comes from Yahweh, so we cannot speak to you bad or good. Behold, Rebekah is before you. Take her and go. Let her be the wife of your master's son, as Yahweh has spoken." Now it happened when Abraham's servant heard their words, he bowed himself to the ground before Yahweh. The servant brought out the articles of silver and articles of gold and garments and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave precious things to her brother and to her mother. Then he and the men who were with him ate and drank and spent the night. Then they arose early in the morning and said, "Send me away to my master." But her brother and mother said, "Well, let the young woman stay with us for a few days, or even 10. Afterwards she will go." And he said to them, "Do not delay me, since Yahweh has made my way successful. Send me away that I may go to my master." They said, "We will call the young woman and ask her about her wishes." Then they called Rebekah and said to her, "Will you go with this man?" She said, "I will go." Thus they sent away their sister Rebekah and her nurse with Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, May you, our sister, become thousands of 10,000s, and may your seed possess the gate of those who hate him." Then Rebekah arose with her young women, and they mounted their camels and went after the man. So the servant took Rebekah and went. Now, Isaac had come. Making sure I don't lose notes. Cool. All right. We are kind of missing them in the middle. I'm going to scroll through these really quick before I pick up the next section, just to make sure we don't lose this for you. This way, if you didn't see it before, you can at least pause and read through it now. There we go. There we go. Now, Isaac had come up from going to Beer Lahai Roi, for he was living in the land of the Negev. And Isaac went out to muse in the field toward the evening, and he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, the camels were coming. And Rebekah lifted up her eyes and saw Isaac, and dismounted from the camel. Then she said to the servant, "Who is that man walking in the field to meet us?" And the servant said, "He is my master." Then she took her veil and covered herself. And the servant recounted to Isaac all the things that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Thus Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. All right, that is all the text and notes thus far. Let's move on to Matthew chapter 23. Then Jesus spoke to the crowds and to his disciples, saying, "The scribes and the Pharisees have seated themselves in the chair of Moses. Therefore, all that they tell you, do and keep, but do not do it according to their deeds. For they say things and do not do them. And they tie up heavy burdens and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves are unwilling to move them with so much as a finger. But they do all their deeds to be noticed by men, for they broaden their phylacteries and lengthen the tassels of their garments. And they love the place of honor at banquets, and the best seats in the synagogues, and respectful greetings in the marketplaces, and being called rabbi by men. But do not be called rabbi, for one is your teacher, and you are all brothers. And do not call anyone on earth your father, for one is your Father, he who is in heaven. And do not be called instructors, for one is your instructor, that is, Christ. But the greatest among you shall be your servant. And whoever exalts himself shall be humbled, and whoever humbles himself shall be exalted. But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you shut off the kingdom of heaven from people. For you do not enter in yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in." Again, we're at another bracketed section. This next verse is bracketed, meaning that it's not found in the it's not found in the earliest and most reliable parchments that we have. So it's bracketed here to show that it's probably not original to the text and probably added afterward, but because most people expect to see it, we'll read it here for you. Here we go, the bracketed section. "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense you make long prayers. Therefore you will receive greater condemnation." Now we're back in the regular text. Verse 15, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you travel around on sea and land to make one proselyte. And when he becomes one, you make him twice as much a son of hell as yourselves. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, whoever swears by the sanctuary, well, that is nothing, but whoever swears by the gold of the sanctuary is obligated. You fools and blind men, for which is more important, the gold or the sanctuary that sanctified the gold? And whoever swears by the altar, well, that is nothing. But whoever swears by the offering on it, well, he is obligated. You blind men, what is more important, the offering or the altar that sanctifies the offering? Therefore, whoever swears by the altar swears by both the altar and everything on it, and whoever swears by the sanctuary swears by both the sanctuary and him who dwells within it. And whoever swears by heaven swears by both the throne of God and by him who sits upon it. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and have neglected the weightier provisions of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. But these are the things that you should have done without neglecting the others. You blind guides, who strain out a gnat but swallow a camel. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you clean the outside of the cup and of the dish, but inside they are full of robbery and self-indulgence, self-worship. Verse 26, you blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and of the dish, so that the outside of it may become clean also. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which on the outside appear beautiful, but inside they're full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. In this way you also outwardly appear righteous to men, but inwardly you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you build the tombs of the prophets and adorn the monuments of the righteous, and say, oh, if we had been living in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partners with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. So you bear witness against yourselves that you are the sons of those who murdered the prophets. I'll make sure we don't lose notes here. Cool. Fill up, then, the measure of the guilt of your fathers, you serpents, you brood of vipers. How will you escape the sentence of hell? On account of this, behold, I am sending you the prophets and the wise men and the scribes. Some of them you will kill and crucify, and some of them you will flog in the synagogues, or in your synagogues, and persecute from city to city, so that upon you may fall the guilt of all the righteous blood shed on earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah. See what he did? A to Z. The son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the sanctuary and the altar. Truly I say to you, all these things will come upon this generation. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together, the way a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you did not want it. Behold, your house is being left to you desolate. For I say to you, from now on you will not see me until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Now Nehemiah chapter 13. On that day, they read from the book of Moses in the hearing of the people. And there was found written in it that no Ammonite or Moabite should ever enter the assembly of God, because they did not meet the sons of Israel with bread and water, but hired Balaam against them to curse them. However, our God turned the curse into a blessing. So when they heard the law, they separated all foreigners from Israel. Now, prior to this, Eliashib the priest, who was in charge over the chambers of the house of our God, being related to Tobiah, had prepared a large room for him, where formerly they had put grain offerings, the frankincense, the utensils, and the tithes of grain, and also new wine and oil, commanded for the Levites, the singers, and the gatekeepers, as well as the contributions for the priests. But during all this time I was not in Jerusalem, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, king of Babylon, I had gone to the king. After some time, however, I asked leave from the king, and I came to Jerusalem, and discerned the evil that Eliashib had done for Tobiah by preparing a chamber for him in the courts of the house of God. It was very evil to me, so I threw all of Tobiah's household goods out of the chamber. Then I said, then I said the word, and they cleaned the chambers. And I returned there the utensils of the house of God, with the grain offerings and frankincense. I also came to know that the portions of the Levites had not been given them. Yep, that's the right thing. So the Levites and the singers who did the work had fled, each to his own field. Again, the Levites are supposed to be serving the temple, but they're not, because they don't have money or food or provisions to take care of their needs, so they went back to work. They were supposed to be given things, but they weren't. Verse 11, so I contended against the officials and said, why is the house of God forsaken? Then I gathered them together and had them stand in their posts. All Judah then brought in the tithe of grain and new wine and oil into the storehouses. In charge of the storehouses, I appointed Shelemiah the priest, Zadok the scribe, and Pedaiah of the Levites. In addition to them was Hanan the son of Zakur, the son of Mattaniah, for they were counted as faithful, and it was their task to apportion everything to their relatives. Remember me for this, O my God, and do not blot out my loving kindnesses, which I have shown for the house of my God and its responsibilities. In those days I saw in Judah some who were treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in sacks of grain and loading them on donkeys, as well as wine and grapes, figs, and all kinds of loads. And they brought them into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. So I testified against them on the day that they sold food. Also, men of Tyre were living there, who brought in fish and all kinds of merchandise, and sold them to the sons of Judah on the Sabbath, even in Jerusalem. Then I contended with the nobles of Judah and said to them, what is this evil thing you are doing, even profaning the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers do the same? And so our God brought on us and on all this city, brought on this city all this calamity? Yet you are adding to his anger on Israel by profaning the Sabbath. Now it happened that just as it grew dark at the gates of Jerusalem before the Sabbath, I said the word, and the doors were shut. Then I said that they should not open them until after the Sabbath. Then I had some of my young men stand at the gate so that no load would enter on the Sabbath day. Once or twice the traders and the merchants of every kind of merchandise spent the night outside Jerusalem. Then I warned them and said to them, why do you spend the night in front of the wall? If you do so again, I will send forth my hand against you. And from that time they did not come on the Sabbath. And I said to the Levites that they should cleanse themselves and come as gatekeepers to keep the Sabbath day holy. For this also, remember me, O my God, and have compassion on me according to the greatness of your loving kindness. In those days I also saw that the Jews had married women from Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab. As for their children, half spoke the language of Ashdod, and none of them was able to speak the language of Judah, but only the tongue of his own people. So I contended with them and cursed them, and struck some of them and pulled out their hair, and made them swear by God, you shall not give your daughters to their sons, nor take up their daughters for your sons or for yourselves. Did not Solomon, king of Israel, sin regarding these things? Yet among the many nations there was no king like him, and he was loved by his God, and God gave him to be king over all Israel. Nevertheless, the foreign women caused even him to sin. Do we then hear about you, that you have done all this great evil by acting unfaithfully against our God by marrying foreign women? Even one of the sons of Jehoiada, the son of Eliashib, the high priest, was a son-in-law of Sanballat the Horonite. So I made him flee away from me. Remember them, O my God, because they have defiled the priesthood and the covenant of the priesthood and the Levites. Thus I cleansed them from everything foreign and ensured that the responsibilities stood for the priests and the Levites, each in his work. And I arranged for the supply of wood at fixed times and for the first fruits. Remember me, O my God, for good. Let's go ahead and move on now to Acts chapter 23. So, what's happened here? Right now, um, the what's a good way to put this? The cohort, the ruler of he's basically the Roman um, military ruler, right? Um, over Jerusalem has now arrested, well, kind of arrested Paul. He's asked him to stay there, right? Which he, because previously he had bound him with chains and then had was going to have him whipped, right? Both things are not right to do for somebody who's an accused person. So sorry, an unaccused person, so long as they're a Roman citizen. Roman citizens have tons of rights, and so he's asked him to please stay there for the night until they could figure out what's going on, to figure out if there are any real charges against him. Reading verse 30 from the previous chapter. On the next day, wishing to know for certain why he, Paul, had been accused by the Jews, he released him and ordered the chief priests and all the Sanhedrin to come together, and brought Paul down and set him before them. Now, Paul, looking intently at the Sanhedrin, again, the ruling group over all of the Jews, mixed of both Sadducees and Pharisees, the two main sects of the Jews. So he's looking intently at the Sanhedrin and said, "Brothers, I have lived my life in all good conscience before God up to this day." And the high priest Ananias commanded those standing beside him to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, "God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. Do you sit to try me according to the law, and in violation of the law order me to be struck?" But those standing nearby said, "Do you revile the high priest of God?" And Paul immediately says, "I was not aware, my brothers, that he was high priest. For it is written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people." Again, he knows the law. He's showing this here. But knowing that one group were Sadducees and the other Pharisees. Again, Sadducees don't believe in miracles. They don't believe in anything that comes after death. It's just like turning off a light. They believe in no angels or anything else. Whereas the Pharisees, as students of Scripture, believe in all of these things, right? So, seeing here that there's two different groups, Sadducees and Pharisees, Paul began crying out in the Sanhedrin, "Brothers, I am a Pharisee, a son of Pharisees, and I am on trial for the hope and resurrection of the dead." It's partially true. As he said this, there was dissension between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. For the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, nor angel, nor spirit, but Pharisees acknowledge them all. And there occurred a great outcry, and some of the scribes of the Pharisees, starting over verse 9, and there occurred a great outcry. Words are super hard today. We've been fighting through it all day. We're going to fight through it to the end. We're at the last book. We can do this. I believe in us. Okay, let's go. Verse 9. And there occurred a great outcry. And some of the scribes of the Pharisaic party stood up and began to argue heatedly, saying, "We find nothing wrong with this man. Suppose a spirit or an angel has spoken to him." And as a great dissension was developing, because the commander was afraid Paul would be torn to pieces by them, he ordered the troops to go down and take him away from them by force, bringing him into the barracks. But on that night, the Lord stood at his side and said, "Take courage, for as you have solemnly borne witness to my cause at Jerusalem, so you must bear witness at Rome also." Now, when it was day, the Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves under a curse, saying that they would neither eat nor drink until they had killed Paul. And there were more than 40 who formed this scheme. They came to the chief priests and the elders and said, "We have bound ourselves under a curse to taste nothing until we have killed Paul. So now, you, along with the Sanhedrin, notify the commander to bring him down to you, as though you were going to determine his case more carefully. And we, for our part, are ready to slay him before he comes near." But when the son of Paul's sister heard of their ambush, he came and entered the barracks and reported it to Paul. And Paul called one of the centurions and said to him, "Lead this young man to the commander, for he has something important to report to him." So he took him and led him to the commander and said, "Paul, the prisoner, called me to him and asked me to lead this young man to you, since he has something to tell you." The commander took him by the hand and, stepping aside, began to inquire of him more privately, "What is it that you have to report to me?" And he said, "The Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul down tomorrow to the Sanhedrin, as though they were going to inquire somewhat more carefully about him. So do not be persuaded by them. For more than 40 of them, who have bound themselves under a curse not to eat nor drink until they slay him, are lying in wait for him. And now they are ready and waiting for the promise from you." So the commander let the young man go, instructing him, "Tell no one that you have notified me of these things." And when he called to him 2 of the centurions, again, a centurion is a leader over 100 people, or 100 soldiers, he said, "Make ready 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to proceed to Caesarea by the 3rd hour of the night." So that's like 9 p.m. "And provide mounts to put Paul on and bring him safely to Felix the governor." And he wrote a letter having this form: "Claudius Lysias, to the most excellent governor Felix, greetings. When this man was arrested by the Jews and was about to be slain by them, I came up to them with troops and rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman." Well, we know that's not the actual order, but he's got to make himself look good. It's political. Verse 28. "And wanting to ascertain the charge for which they were accusing him, I brought him down to their Sanhedrin and found him to be accused over questions about their law, but under no accusation deserving death or imprisonment. And when I found him to be, and when I was informed that there would be a plot against the man, I sent him to you at once, also instructing his accusers to speak against him before you. So the soldiers, according to their orders, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris. But the next day, leaving the horsemen to go on with him, they returned to their barracks. When these had come to Caesarea and delivered the letter to the governor, they also presented Paul to him. When he had read it, he asked what province he was from, and when he learned he was from Cilicia, he said, "I will give you a hearing after your accusers arrive also," giving orders for him to be kept in Herod's praetorium. Bringing up the rest of the notes here for you, and there we go. All right, that is all the text, and that is all the notes also for today. We made it. Yay! God willing, we'll be back tomorrow. Behold, the word of the Lord.